This is where truth and vulnerability are put on the altar. Fear and failures are celebrated as they should be. And we unapologetically peel back all the layers. Welcome to Bare Naked Radio. It's time to get raw, real, and inspired with your host, Dawn Gluskin.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Bare Naked Radio. I am your host, Dawn Gluskin, and today I am so excited to be chatting with this amazing woman, Sarah Shoemaker. Say hello, Sarah.
Hey, Dawn. Hey, audience. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so excited to have you. We're just having a great chat before the show for like the last 30 minutes. I was like, oh, we need to get started. So excited to get going with you so everyone else can listen in. Sarah is a women's resiliency coach who comes to this work after a lifetime of digging in, close observation, and doing the work personally. After becoming a birth mother at the age of 19, Sarah began striving and playing by all the rules, only to wake up one day in her early 30s and realize the true self that she had left behind. Always on a journey of the heart, Sarah has recently turned her career in education and leadership into one focused on women and mothers in an effort to heal the collective wounded story of never enough. A woman of my own heart.
Mm-hmm.
So excited to have you here. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Dawn. I love your mission of just truth storytelling. It's lovely. It's right in alignment.
Yes, it is. And I so get like playing by all the rules and just like waking up one day and being like, oh, no, no more. I was born to be a rebel. So good to unleash that.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's just get right into it and talk about your story a little bit here. So you went from, at the age of 19, being a birth mother and having those feelings that we all can relate to in some way of I'm not enough, feeling disempowered. And all these many years later, you've come full circle and now you found your power and you're taking a stand for other women to help them step into theirs, which is just beautiful how it comes around full circle that way. So let's just hear about it a little bit. So tell us, take us back to age 19, how life was then and how you stepped into this purpose.
Yeah, I love that short version of the full circle, right? It doesn't feel like that once you're going.
Yes. When you're in it, it's like a long winding road, but yes.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it's like that.
It is. It's like, oh, that was all it took, right?
Right.
Yeah. So at 18, I got pregnant in my first semester of college, which was a shocker to everyone for sure. Mm-hmm. And although I was very close with the birth father, after I became pregnant, I became very strained. And so I kind of had this like, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to do what needs to be done. And I really, really focused in on the pregnancy, on making sure she was okay, on making sure she was well. And then I chose her family through an open adoption process. So I've actually been blessed enough to know my daughter and her family as she's grown. She'll be 18 this year, which is wild.
Wow.
Yeah. But the story of like being an 18-year-old, 19-year-old mother and coming from a family that really valued education, the story was, well, you're not enough yet. You're not old enough yet. You don't have enough education yet. You don't have the marriage yet or the money yet. And so after placing my daughter, and those things become just like our internal belief, like our internal monologue, right?
Yeah.
And no one,
absolutely. And I think we all have our own version of that, something that happened in our life, an event, and we create this whole story around it. Like this thing that happened, now it means something about me and who I am. And it's not true, but we believe it like it is. And we live our life like it's true.
Right. And that's where, that's trauma, right? It gets lodged and it has a story and a tape around it. And until we do some true healing work and some real digging in, those are the tapes that play. And so, I just set about like, okay, well, if I can't raise this child, I am going to do everything I can in order to be a mother again one day. And, in order to prove that I'm like good enough. And so I immediately went back to college. Like I was back in college probably 2 weeks after she was born. And I got one degree, and then I immediately went back for a master's in special ed. And then later I got a third degree, right? So it was like all of these degrees, like, oh, okay, well, I still don't feel successful yet. Like,
Right.
The finances like still aren't in place yet. I wonder why. And it's because the tape was like still playing. Right.
Yeah, it's when we go out and outside of ourselves too. I just need to go one more degree, then I'm going to love myself and life will be amazing. And it's like, no, that didn't work. Okay, another degree, and then it's going to happen. And we all have our version of that, going outside ourselves and looking for that next thing that's going to make it all come together.
Right. And so, definitely lived that. And I talk about striving and efforting, and like that is not a word in the dictionary, and it is one of
should be. Let's put it in there.
It's one of my goals to like get it in there because it's so real for so many women. Just like continual efforting to just like get there, to just be enough, right? So I did. I came back around to being a mother again, thank goodness. And my son is now 9. But when he was about 4 years old, I really started to remember the inherent nature of who I was and like reawaken to that. And I developed like a mindfulness meditation practice at the time, which is now what I help teach to women in my coaching. But really it helped alleviate those anxious tapes of, oh, I just have to do one more thing, or, I'll feel successful when. Just began the long road back to myself, I guess is how they say it, right?
So when you finally turned the gaze inward and the attention inward, you realized, oh, I am enough. I am perfectly enough, just who I am in the world, just how I'm being. And I don't need all that other outside validation, which is the beautiful thing about a meditation practice and other spiritual practices, is that we learn that we are enough. And we always have been, always will be. And it doesn't matter what our circumstances are or what's happened in our life or what choices we've made. We're all perfectly divine beings that are more than enough.
So much more than enough. And I say sometimes enough is like only a baseline,
right?
Beyond that, once we finally remember. And we still get caught up in it, right? Like every single one of us, as I'm starting this business, I'm, sometimes finding myself like asking the same questions or saying like, oh, I don't know enough about that yet. And then I laugh because I'm watching what I'm doing. It doesn't all fully go away. But yes, when we turn toward ourselves and practice this acceptance that maybe we weren't shown externally, but we can start to give ourselves internally, we change our world.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone else who's on that path now and they're trying to look inwards, they're trying to find the truth of who they are and maybe erase some of those stories that are not serving. What's some other work or some other tools or something they can actually implement in their life right now, in addition to the meditation, which is, of course, very powerful, but what else can they start to look at and explore to start shifting?
Yeah, great. So I actually want to stick with this topic of mindfulness for a minute because so often we're like looking for the next answer or the next affirmation or, the next thing outside of ourselves.
Right.
But there's this alchemy that happens within the individual when we can sit in full presence of ourselves. And so let's say that there's like an emotion that you'd rather not have, but continues to be persistent in your life, right? Oftentimes what we're doing is like walking away from that emotion and we want to turn our back on it, when really what we need to do is cultivate the experience where we can actually learn to sit with it and kind of like turn toward it, right?
Yes.
And then in that process, you shine the light in the areas where where you've been avoiding, and then it doesn't have as much power anymore, right?
Yeah, I love that. And, because nobody ever teaches us that. We have this belief somewhere that, anger is bad, or it's not good to feel sad, or, we have these judgments about our emotions. But the truth of the matter is our emotions, it's just information, and it's telling us something. So the more curious we get about that, instead of pushing it away, the more, the faster we can get through it. So like a lot of our instinct is just like pretend it's not there, or we cope with it through whatever, alcohol or sex, or, shopping, or everyone has their own vice of how to deal with that.
Perfectionism. Like
working, like, there's so many ways to, eating, there's just so many ways to not deal with it. But if you just ask it, like, that's what I do. And it sounds a little weird, but it's so powerful. I'm saying, okay, anger, like, what are you trying to tell me today? Or, okay, sadness, like, why are you here? What do I need to know? And to your point, being that is what mindfulness is all about, is being mindful of that, and just exploring it and asking it, and sitting in meditation and letting the answers come through. It's like, oh, I'm angry because I'm not doing what I want in this world. That's why, and it's manifesting as anger. So I need to change this, or so powerful.
So powerful. And, so often these beliefs or these circumstances, these like things that happen in our lives, they become trapped in the body too. Like, not only is it this like trapped emotion or trapped like thought pattern, but all of that gets trapped in the body. And so, really kind of getting in touch with like, well, how does the body hold these patterns? And, I do some of that work with women, but, there's plenty of great healers out there that do that kind of work too. But sometimes like the mind is so busy blocking what it is that we're trying to avoid, that like the truth actually lies elsewhere, right? So when I was like in my 20s and early 30s, I was actually like holding trauma patterns in my body that I was perpetuating and like not even realizing it, right? So as I was like going, the cortisol was like always up. And I eventually had this like big adrenal crash when I was probably like 33 years old. And so, I mean, for your adrenals to be like that tired by the time you're 33, like I was really hustling, And
I experienced the same thing. This is a burnout. What happens, at least in my world, it was like, okay, so I'm just going to like wake up and I'm going to get my coffee, because you need that stimulant to get going. And like, go all day, maybe have more coffee, like whatever it takes, hustle. And then at night, it was like, I needed to wind down. So I was like, oh, I need to have my glass of wine or 2 glasses. And then I finally realized a pattern. I'm like, wait a second, I need a substance to start my day. And I need a substance to end my day. And everything in between is just go, and like working out and working and I experienced the same sort of thing. And it's and we're about the same age too. So it's something that we do to ourselves. And now I don't drink coffee or wine and I like function beautifully. And I'm like, I feel the best I've had in my life, because I've gotten curious about like, why does it have to be like this, and gotten more back to my body's natural rhythms and ways of being, and listening. Some days are ebb days, which means just, resting and relaxing. And then I have my flow days where I can hustle, and it's just tuning in.
Right. Oh,
so that's a great point too. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Like, those cycles of rest are just so essential for the nourishment of the body. And, yourself some nourishment.
And after an ebb, if you take the time for yourself, and you know that you've been working really hard, and you take that day just to meditate, go to the beach, journal, get a massage, just take care of yourself. And the next day you're back at it. You're so refreshed. The ideas are flowing. You're just like reinvigorated. They're so critical. So the busier you are, the more important those days are.
It's so true. And I think like for the women who are listening, who are just still like crunching it all the time, just really not allowing themselves to slow down because they think that there's no time to slow down. Like, it is really something to experiment with, because that pause, allows you to get this. I love when people call emotions like a navigation system, right?
Oh yeah. I love that.
Yeah, because it really allows you to, what is the next piece of action that would actually make me feel better, not just like accomplish the
Yes.
next thing, but really be in alignment with what I am trying to create and produce in the world.
Yeah. And that's such a great word, alignment, feeling. So the word in there is not strategy. It's not about forcing and I'm all for strategy. Like you need to have strategy in your business. You can't just like feel your way through everything, even though I basically do. You do have to have some strategy, but yeah, that tuning in is so powerful because then what should I say yes to? What should I say no to? What should I do today? And I actually say that every morning in my morning ritual, my morning prayer. And then I ask that question, like, what would you have me do today? What would you have me say? Where would you have me go? Like, into whom? And just ask those questions and get curious and just receive whatever comes through.
Yeah.
And I know for some people that may sound a little out there, but it's the energy and the intention, and it's so powerful. And it's how I manage everything I do is my schedule, I don't even schedule anything before 10 o'clock every morning. That time before that is my time to journal, to meditate, to take care of myself. And I get a lot done from that. Yeah.
That's beautiful. From that centered place. Yeah. And I mean, if that spiritual ring really isn't like resounding for people, I came from working in schools and like teaching mindfulness in schools. And there we're not talking about mindfulness as a spiritual practice, right? It's very secular. So, we say inserting the pause, right? You're just like bringing this pause that's intentional into your day, and then, like breathing. And in doing that, we're like regulating the nervous system, regulating the body, and clearing the space a little bit for that, maybe it's divinely inspired action. Maybe it's just like a spiritual message. Maybe it's just like, oh, right, that was the next thing I wanted to do, like wherever folks are coming from. But
so don't get tripped up over the language and just get curious about it. And like, I like how you said that, a pause, like instead of let's meditate. No, let's just pause. Let's check in with ourselves. So language is beautiful. I love language and I'm a writer, but it also can be limiting. And sometimes we can be limited by the constraints of language. So don't ever get tripped up with a concept or an idea because of the wording, but just feel into it and be curious about how that can affect your life.
Yeah, totally. Something for everyone.
I like how you said that. So I wanted to talk too. So you have recently made the transition into full-time entrepreneurship. So first of all, congratulations. Yay.
Thank you.
The most exciting and the most scariest time of one's life. When you look over the edge of that cliff and you're like, I'm just going to do it. And you jump and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm falling. And then at some point your wings come in and you start flying, but it's exhilarating and it's scary. And so tell us a little bit about how that is for you and what you're up to now, like what you're going into full time and why you were called to do it.
Awesome. Yeah. I don't quite feel like I'm falling. So I hope that maybe that's to come, or maybe
it's a ride. It's like day by day.
Yeah, totally. So I started embodied breath about 6 or 8 months ago. This idea was like really coming to me. And we just had this conversation about whether or not to use spiritual language. But I will say that I have been like answering a call. It is not something I even expected to be doing. But about a year ago, I started to really feel pulled in this direction. And I've been working with children in schools, but, my main focus was never really the academics. Even as a school administrator, my main focuses were how do kids feel? How are their hearts? Like, how are their bodies? And so really creating heart-centered, holistic schools. And in doing that, I was also kind of doing all of my personal work like alongside of that in the last 4 or 5 years. And so my heart was being called to women, and I'm also watching the mothers of the adolescents that I worked with. And, I'm watching like these loops that trip us up as women and as mothers, these like not good enough loops, shame loops, guilt loops. And just with all of the trauma healing that I had gone back to do, like all of the inquiry that I had personally still walk through around the relationship between the masculine and the feminine. And I'm just really, really being called to work with women and mostly allow women the space to share their story, like what you're doing, Dawn, and to really like own what it is they really want in their lives. So if we're following somebody else's rules that were set up a long time ago, like maybe there's a part of us that got lost. Yeah.
And that's one thing we talk about on this show a lot is the number one deathbed regret. And I bring that up just because like we have time to shift that now while we're still living and not wait till we're in that point and just looking back. But what people always say when asked that question, you know, do you have any regrets? Is there anything you would do differently?
Yeah.
The most prominent answer is, I wish I had lived a life true to myself instead of the life that others had wished for me.
Yes.
And that's like what you're saying. Like we live by the other people's rules, other people's wishes, desires. We get trapped in other people's beliefs and it gets so clouded. Like we're like, who even am I? What do I want? And we want to make other people happy. And then at the end of our life, we have like this epiphany, like, oh my God, I was supposed to be doing this the whole time. And you know, unfortunately, it's too late.
Oh, how sad is that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But it's not too late right now. And for people that have that, and I find that the call, as you call it, which I love, that's what I call it too. It sometimes it whispers, and you know, it's like there's this knowing, like there's something else, there's something more. I love being a mom. I love being working for this company or whatever it is. I love this part of my life, and I know I'm here on this planet right now for something more.
Right.
And either rise up and answer it, even though it's scary and even though you don't know the next step and what's the future going to look like, or you can ignore it, which a lot of us do for years and years. And sometimes the universe will smack you in the head with a 2x4 to wake you up. And sometimes you step into it on your own, and sometimes you never do. And that's when that regret comes in at the deathbed part.
Right. Yeah. I'm watching, so one of the reasons why I feel like I'm not freaking out right now in terms of your entrepreneurial question is because, I've been doing both. Like I've been straddling both worlds in education and entrepreneurship for like half a year now. And so,
which from a strategy perspective is actually a great strategy, kind of like wean your way in. You don't just wake up one day and like quit my job. And
and that wasn't the process. And I'm a single woman with a mortgage, like that wasn't gonna happen.
Right.
So being strategic and heartfelt at the same time. But I was just going to say that, I'll have calls with women because I always give like a free consult, so that we can feel each other out, like no pressure, right? Because the woman has to be ready. We have to be ready to say yes for ourselves and to ourselves. And I've gotten off the phone with women and they say, oh, well, I'm going to think about it. And then it's like, not right now. And I feel sad, and generally speaking, because I'm like, oh man, she just turned off that light for a little bit, which is like, everybody has their process. Like, I wish each of them well. Right. But, I hope that it turns back on for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that it's not like that end of the life, regret, like, oh, I was such a good mom. But I stuck with that career that I really didn't want, like that it's heartbreaking because we do all have these specific gifts to bring to
and what happens a lot of time too when people do that, when they just can't quite find the courage to take that step, or they're just not quite ready and they keep saying, what will we do? A lot of times tomorrow or next week, next month, give me 6 more months. When I owned my technology company, and my story is I grew a business from 0 to 3 million back to 0 again. And the whole time I was in it, I knew that wasn't what I was meant to do. I was making good money. I loved it, but I always had this in the back of my head. I'm going to do this for 1 more year. Then I'm going to sell the company. I'm going to take that money. I'm going to do what I really love. And like 7 years later, the universe is listening to me the whole time. It's like, okay, Dawn, today's the day. Like your time is up. We're going to take all of this from you and you're going to have to start from scratch. And now's your chance to do it right. In which I did. And it was devastating, but I got the message finally.
Right. Sometime it's going to come. Yeah. Sometimes in many forms. Yeah.
And that's how it occurs for some of us. Like some of us, need that 2x4 in the head.
Right.
Or sometimes it shows up as an illness, people working themselves to death and like going in the hospital and almost losing their life. And then they get that second chance. And, there's just different variations of how we finally come to the truth of who we are and taking that next step.
Yeah.
And it is scary, but I just, and anyone listening, like if you have that curiosity, I just invite you to explore it. And as someone that also does coaching and consulting and healing work, I get what you said when you're like so sad for them because you want it so bad for them and you can see like their future for them. And you also have to respect where they are and just their readiness and their willingness, and you can never force it. So it's like you just provide a space and, and be open to supporting someone and when they're ready.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, that is completely my approach. Like, and I kind of joke a little bit because I worked in special education for a number of years. Like there's a lot of resistance on the part of some children. And I love that. I love the mystery. I love the resistance. And, about 3 or 4 months ago, I was like, oh my gosh, you know what? I just cannot wait to work with clients who are just so ready to work with me, like
those are the best.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm doing here. Like I'm not pressuring anyone into doing work that they're not ready to do. And I'm standing here and I'm only working with women right now. I'm only coaching women. And, so it really is this sisterhood of like, okay, women, what do you want? What do you know deep down that you may have been ignoring? Like what kind of support, do you need? And so.
And I know too, from my own experience that, the conversations that you're having with them, even if they're not ready to take that next step yet, you are still planting a seed or helping them plant the seed, helping them, water it a little bit and it's going to grow and they'll come back. They just might need to work through some stuff first.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and if it's not me, it's not me. It's not about that. It's this work is to be of service.
Oh yeah,
with feminine right now. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But I do see there's a lot of that going on in the planet right now where people are like really assessing their lives. And I see, and on one time it's like on one hand, it's a little bit destructive. You see like these long-term careers ending or these long-term relationships are ending. And there's all these like big endings going on, but on the other side of that are these new beginnings.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's just a calling out there in the universe for people, women and men, to rise up and to bring us into this new world. There's so much going on in the world right now that's just heartbreaking, and it's not who we are as humans. Like it's not why we're here. It's not the way things could be, and we're here to shift that. And people are stepping up. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I love it. So I was just thinking that I wanted to mention this thing about story that came to mind. Like a lot of us identify with a story that has this pain point where we get stuck in it. Right. And then there's this, and you probably work with this a lot. And then there's like this point where you honor the story, honor the trauma, have healed it, right? Because it really does take some healing. It's not like you just one day wake up and decide I'm not going to. Yeah. I mean,
it doesn't work like that. It's a process.
It is such a process. It's like picking up every rock on the path and looking under it. And, that's what I inherently do for myself. My birthday is next month and I was born on the day of the soul searcher, and it's like, leave no rock unturned. Like that is the story of my life. But, after you've done that healing, then there's like honor for the story without identifying with those pain points anymore. Like I can talk about the pregnancy of my first child and her adoption and how it changed my life, but there's not this emotional charge to it. Like I'm reliving the pain every time, that's when to tell the story.
Yeah. Like, and that's the thing. And that's why I do the work I do around storytelling. It's like a big part of the work I do in my business and, helping people find out who they are and tell their stories, because like when we have like shame around something, we walk around and we take that with us everywhere we go. That whole, like, I'm not enough, or they're going to find out the truth about me. I can't ever let anyone know this. So we show up as this like masked version of ourselves, just pretending like, oh God, I hope they never find out about me.
Right.
But when you just like rip it, like, and that's why this is Bare Naked Radio. It's about like just ripping it off, like peeling off all those masks, all those layers, and being like, no, this is who I am, and just being vulnerable. This is my story. This is my life. And you know what? I'm not ashamed of it anymore. And there's something just so healing and liberating about that once you own your story, it no longer owns you. And you don't have to like go public and shout from the rooftops, but just even owning it with yourself. Saying, yeah, that's what happened to me. And you know what? I'm not ashamed of it anymore.
Right.
Yeah, it's so healing. It's so liberating.
Right.
Yeah.
And I personally believe that like inside of those deepest traumas, inside of that story that we're holding on to, feeling shame about, is also our greatest liberation and like our greatest life's lesson, and therefore our greatest gift to offer back to the world.
Yes, that's how it goes. Yes. So my stand in the world is about, full self-expression and being the truth of who you are. And the irony is like, I spent my childhood and a lot of my early years being the opposite of that, completely unself-expressed, very quiet, very withdrawn, and didn't have a voice. And now I'm like, give me a microphone.
Now
I won't shut up. But it's like full circle, and the process I did. And of course, like we always teach, what our struggle, our pain, like that becomes what we get to teach in the world. And also what we get to learn and continue to master and embody even deeper.
Right. Ooh,
yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this work in the world. It's so needed. Yeah.
I love it. And I also want to say one other thing too, when you talk about healing, and it doesn't happen overnight, and that's how it occurs. And as you start doing this work, as you start, practicing mindfulness, as you start looking at your shadows, as you start really getting real about your emotions and what are they here to tell me, as you start making that like your everyday practice.
That's right.
You get to start it, because it's like a muscle. You're like, when you go to the gym and you work out a muscle and it becomes stronger, your ability to work through any situation and heal through a crisis of any is like becomes so much easier. Like, something that would normally take you out for 6 months, you could like work through it in 6 minutes. Like once you become like masterful at this, you feel it. You're like, what are you here to teach me? Got it. Okay. Moving on. It's like, it becomes like that.
Right.
So it's worth it to do the work, and life gets easier.
Right.
A little motivation for anyone listening that's like, oh, but it's so much work, and it's powerful, and it gets easier.
Yeah, it really does. And, this is why I love mindfulness as a tool, because it's really accessible, and it doesn't have to be like a spiritual practice unless you want it to be. Like, it's not a prayer practice unless you want it to be. But just the breath work and the orientation, like I'm seeing results in my clients where they were like super afraid of being seen in the world or doing any sort of public speaking, or like even like a woman speaking up in a room full of men in a meeting,
right?
That kind of thing. And then they're seeing the results in that from their personal practice. Like I'm the coach, I'm the guide, but really their own personal practice around these techniques that we're learning together it's like transforming their lives on a daily basis. So they're like, oh, okay, so this time I felt strong enough, centered enough, regulated enough in my body to speak up, when I was being spoken over. And so, yeah, keep showing up for yourself.
Yes. And you'll be surprised over some amount of time as you continue doing this work. Like you're just going to like reach these new levels of badassery that you didn't even know existed in yourself. So beautiful.
Yes.
So I'm loving this conversation. I would talk to you all day because we could just talk and talk and talk. And I would love that. And it's getting to the end of the show. So so I always like to let our audience know where they can find out more about you. If they're vibing with your message, like where are you on social media? What are you up to? Now's your chance to let people know.
Sounds good. Yeah. My website is yourembodiedbreath.com. And I really do use a lot of Facebook and Instagram. So I'm Sarah Shoemaker on Facebook, and I'm also Embodied Breath on Facebook and Instagram. I would love to connect with women one-on-one. I have a lot of one-on-one coaching opportunities right now, and some group work. But yeah, as I follow my heart, we'll see how that group work evolves. I do work, online and distance as well. So proximity to me physically is not an obstacle.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you are wanting to connect with Sarah, make sure you go check out her website, follow on social media, and all of those addresses will also be in the show notes on barenakedradio.com. So definitely hook up with her. Well, Sarah, it has been absolutely amazing talking to you. You're just such a wealth of knowledge, and you just have this this like real grounded presence. You just feel like, like in your presence. So, yeah. So thank you so much for sharing so openly with us today.
Yeah. And like I said, thank you so much for your work in the world. Sharing stories is powerful practice. So thank you for stepping into your gifts and bringing it to all of us.
Oh, absolutely. It is my pleasure. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Bare Naked Radio. We invite you to join us in the Naked Soul Tribe on Facebook and sound off about this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you connect with your host at Dawn Gluskin on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All show notes and links are accessible on barenakedradio.com.